Of you who have just joined. I think we're right at 2:45, and as a communication scholar, it is pretty painful to be hitting the mute button for the rest of you. This is maybe my worst nightmare come true. I am an assistant professor at Taylor University here in the cornfields of Indiana. It is a liberal arts institution of about 2,000 students. But I have been teaching in the field of communication, and specifically oral communication courses and public speaking for about 20 years, both in Michigan and a bit online, believe it or not, as well as being here in Taylor, which is my second year. And I'd like to begin our session by talking about two stories you'll find in the shared notes document in our shared file, just a basic overview of some of the points that I'd like to cover today regarding how to navigate some of the barriers with students and with faculty and administrators, and I'm going to kind of do it in that order and in those two chunks. But it started with two particular stories here of how this became such a necessity. Public speaking, because of its long tradition, and it's often a plug and play course for in various institutions to use it for grad students to teach it. It is often what we call a plug and play course that doesn't have a lot of latitude built in. And so many of us were schooled in pedagogy through that course. And as an oral presentation course, it has a number of things that tend to be consistent across institutions. There's even a conference for basic course directors, which is what I am, within the discipline of communication, and we're talking often about this. Interestingly, even in that world, UDL as a concept has not come up until just this past year. And so I think you're finding our discipline learning how to navigate it for the first time as well. Our challenges began last year with some poor assessment scores for how our course was doing, and we recognized that students were reluctant to take it, both because of their personal anxiety, and there was an alternative course in interpersonal communication that was more interactive and had smaller assignments that were not as presentation driven. And so we started to really ask the question, what's happening with students and their engagement with this kind of content? Because even in the interpersonal class, they were expected to at least be introduced to key presentational skills as part of their gen ed or foundational work, so that through the rest of their time here at the university and beyond into their real life, that they would have the kind of tools to be able to do a quality presentation. Obviously an important skill. But because public speaking is the only touch for many students with the department, it tends to be the kind of thing where it's not just introduced, but it's expected to be mastered. And that is not possible, obviously, in a semester. So the assessment data and the discomfort of students was the first impetus. So that's story number one. Story number two is about a specific student who I'm going to call Brady to protect his personal identity. But Brady was a really bright student who took public speaking with me here at Taylor my very first semester. And he was focused on content that was very uninteresting to many other students, unfamiliar and probably uninteresting, and came from a very specific subfield of film and media. And Brady also struggled very much with some of the most fundamental delivery skills in presenting, and so grappled with how to present and rhythm and style and eye contact. And it made me recognize the biases that we have in public speaking, even if that isn't our primary goal. So many of you may teach in other disciplines, but have a presentational component. And my invitation to us today is to look at the way that we may have expectations for presentations that may cause challenges for students. And then I want to talk about some things that we're doing in our course that may be useful to you as you think about how you're creating assignment explanations or rubrics, or even how you're weighting those assignments. And I'm happy to make additional information available from both our discipline and what I'm learning from UDL. So Brady ended up doing an acceptable job because I had to customize some things for him. But then I thought, why aren't we doing that for more students? And so if you are looking on your notes, or if you're welcome to follow along with what I'm doing, we had a version of the course that was very lockstep. We introduced an assignment that had a presentational component. They were allowed to self-select their topic, which may not be the case for some of your assignments. And then as it was introduced, they were to create this Roman numeral outline and go through a number of practice sessions and then present it in the class as an individual in a live setting. And the rubric itself was pre-scripted from our discipline and has a pretty high priority on obviously the rhetorical triangle, the Aristotelian model, logos, pathos, and ethos. But often I believe that we're focused on delivery, that we catch people's credibility through nonverbals. And so if students are from other cultures, where eye contact has a different set of communication priorities, or if they have high anxiety, or if they're struggling on the spectrum in some way and eye contact is a challenge, all of these things are impacting delivery and ultimately inflecting how we're hearing content. I'll go back to my example of Brady, my hypothetical student, who is a real one. Because presentations are also supposed to consider audience, we have expectations about how socially competent and responsive people are to their audience. And so if someone is passionate about content and often detailed, they may go into jargon and not be sensitive to that, or not know how to read confusion on the face of their audience member, or even respond to something that's going on in a question or answer, or an interruption of some kind. So to navigate some of that, we've created alternate pathways to accomplish the assignment from beginning to end. Students are allowed to, once they create their topic, to do some practices with one another. When we introduce the assignment, we do it orally, we do it in writing, and we do a sample so that students can glean it from a number of aspects. And then in terms of actual presentation, the newest piece that we've added is an option for students to choose to do exactly what we're doing right now, present through a Google Hangout or Zoom conference. Or if students are really struggling, they may choose to do a video that's asynchronous and upload the link to YouTube so that we can view it later independently. When students choose to do it outside of the context of a live presentation, we'll present it in class and use it as a learning opportunity to discuss it together. In this way, we believe that we've reduced the anxiety significantly. If you're wondering if this is a factor with students that at your institution, there is actually a communication apprehension quiz that you can give students absolutely for free from James McCroskey. If you simply Google it, and I'm happy to follow up or send it along. It's called the Communication Apprehension Inventory. And we're now administering that at the beginning of the semester so that we're identifying early students that would have that challenge and inviting them in for office hours, either individually or in small groups. So if they self-identify as high anxiety, or if they're coming up on that test as high anxiety, we know better how to anticipate some of the questions. And as some of you may have found, it's often the case that people will struggle to even say, I'm terrified. And so it's coming out in other ways, that they're just not completing the assignment and they're risking the grades. Right? So by noticing what kinds of excuses we're getting and aligning it with the anxiety measures we know, we're not calling them out in class, obviously, we would never do that. And by approaching this both as a pre and post test, I'm saying test, it's not a scored thing with a grade, but by looking at their results in the beginning and end of the semester to watch their progress is also a wonderful way to show whether some of these adaptations are making the reaching the goals that we had hoped. Another thing that is just an interesting barrier, and I wouldn't have known this, the Roman numeral outline, even some of the structural things can be a real barrier. And so we're allowing students to mind map or bullet out major points and subpoints. If they can find some visual representation or other format to explain some of those things to us, we definitely want to give them permission to do that. So those are some of the things happening at the student level that's creating a new set of dynamics at both our faculty level and administration level. First would be continuity of section, because we're looking for particular outcomes, and much of what we were being assessed on from the university was just through communication fluency. And we've attempted to distribute the set of criteria wider. At one point, we actually had 4 different sets of assessment criteria being looked at, both from the university, the department, the discipline, and then from some of the accreditation standards from our education majors. And so we had to meld them together. And we've created a wider range of assignments so that by the time we get to the presentation unit, we have a little bit more comfort as a class with one another. We've been able to build that confidence in a community, and that we've collaborated in some things. We're doing some assignments as group projects so that students don't have to stand up there individually, or we are doing some formative work that we've got elevator pitches. So we're assessing a number of things, both at the affective level through this anxiety piece. And as we have now broadened our set of outcomes, the university is delighted that it's meeting more of our gen ed requirements, and they've been really supportive. So now we're working on training additional faculty to join in on that. So I would love to just stop for a second and ask anybody to chime in. I'll unmute everyone. If there's someone who would like to ask a question or throw in a text, I would be happy to hear some of your feedback or your ideas, or follow up with you afterward. The tool to practice, we're navigating that. Both students are given a log and they have to practice a total of 7 times. They can do 3 of them on their own independently, and then they're asked to create an audience for 2 times. And then they can even use their phone to record. They can use anything. They're allowed to come in the classroom and record as well. So there's individual practice, there's practice with an audience, and then there's practice with a video. And we do ask them to upload the link, and keep it private, but it's a way for us to go back if they're struggling to say, hey, let's look at how you practiced, so that we can help with some of the tools for another time. There are some learning management systems that have them too. Yes, reimagining expectations around oral presentation is huge. We've also invited students to create their own goal, and we're assessing that with them throughout the semester. So navigating that in terms of grading is still a bit of a challenge, but they come up with their own goals, which may be very different than the ones that we have for them. And then I think they feel an increased sense of self-efficacy along the way. Anything else? If I can be helpful, or if you have other ideas, I would love to hear them. This is continuing to be a heartbeat. UDL has transformed how we're thinking about many of our classes, especially this one. So if you have presentations and want to chat offline, I'd love to hear more. Thank you so much.